How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? So, here's the thing, right? If you've been watching the previous videos here, you guys may have already seen my UNOVA and Johto video that I posted. Well, this video is a compilation of those two, plus some of my extra thoughts at the end. So stay tuned, we're going to go right into the UNOVA part, then I'm going to cut over to the Johto part, and then at the end, I'm going to give you guys my conclusion, like a few extra minutes of just my thoughts, opinions, where I think this stuff is going to go, and what I think we're going to be getting based on everything I've been talking about throughout these two videos. So, let's get right into it. How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? My name is RuffledRowlit, and today I want to talk about specifically what the next game is going to be for Pokemon in 2024. Now, in this video, I'm going to be specifically talking about why I think it might be a UNOVA game, but I'll have another video where I'm going to talk about why it might be a Johto game. So please stay tuned. I'll be making two videos on this, and in the end, I'll be combining both videos and doing an overarching view on which two it might be. But in this video, I specifically want to go and talk about why the next game in 2024 might be UNOVA. So let's get started with the first thing. Number one, there are actually multiple hints by the leaker. So the leaker RuffledRowlit, if you guys do not know him, he's a legitimate leaker. He's been giving out multiple hints towards it being UNOVA, or at least like some of the stuff he's been saying has been kind of hinting towards that. Now, he's not alone in this. There's also been Chinese riddlers and Chinese leakers, and if you don't know what I mean by this, basically the Pokemon community has a very large amount of these people that just kind of give out information, and some of these are known as these Chinese uncles or Chinese aunties or whatever you want to call them, and they're people that are over in China who have leaks and information, and they put it on a website called Tieba Baidu. Now the thing is, they've been posting a lot of stuff, so it's a little bit hard to know exactly what's going on, but one person that I think was verified, and I again, don't quote me on this, but I think one of the people that was verified for this actually came out and said that, hey, the next game is going to be a UNOVA game, and it's going to be a Paradox sort of game. There's also another person that was saying stuff that didn't have legitimate information, but the actual person that had legit info did come out and say that, hey, we're going to be getting ourselves some sort of I don't know, I guess some sort of game that's going to be a Paradox version of UNOVA. But that was the people that were the Chinese leakers. Those are not the only people that we're talking about. We also have RuffledRowlit. Now, RuffledRowlit hasn't outright said, oh, the next game is going to be Pokemon, UNOVA games. He hasn't outright said it, but he has been hinting at it, right? I'll see if I can find a few examples here on the screen to show you guys, but RuffledRowlit has been tweeting a lot, so it's kind of hard to, to find any good examples. But he usually tweets the stuff on Twitter, and if we just look up RuffledRowlit and we go and search for anything that he's been posting, RuffledRowlit black and white remakes, if you just Google that on YouTube, or sorry, Google that on Twitter, and just look it up and just search it up, you'll see that he has a lot of posts that seem to be hinting at that. So one of the biggest posts is probably this one, which says, what's on your wish list? Place your bets. Let's go UNOVA, Pokemon Legends Kyurem, Black and White 3, or Paradox UNOVA, right? And then he kind of responded to that tweet saying, ooh, seems like a lot of people like Legends games. But yeah, so he included 4 options here. Let's go UNOVA, Legends Kyurem, Pokemon Legends Kyurem, Black and White 3, and Paradox UNOVA. Now, keep in mind, this guy is a legitimate leaker, right? He does leak legitimate stuff. So just please keep that in mind. He actually has real information, hence why I'm even bringing him up. Otherwise, I wouldn't even mention him, but he does have real info. So the fact that he's saying stuff like this means that it's heavily possible that one of these 4 things could happen. Now, out of all these 4, Let's go UNOVA, Pokemon Legends Kyurem, Black and White 3, Paradox UNOVA, out of all those 4 options, right? I will talk about which kind of game I think it's going to be at the end of this video, which sort of game, but out of those, it seems to me like the most logical one is a Paradox UNOVA game. Now, what do I mean by Paradox UNOVA game? Well, a version of UNOVA that isn't really what we remember. Like, it's still UNOVA, but different. Similar to if you guys have played the Indigo Disc, there are locations in the Indigo Disc. There's actually a whole place in the Indigo Disc that is based on I think a resort area, with the area where you can find shiny Haxorus, in the original Black and White games, or in Black and White, right? And this whole place, literally on the map, is based on that, which is really cool. And I think that's kind of what you should imagine. It's not going to be a regular UNOVA the way you remember it. It's going to be a version of UNOVA that is different. Either a UNOVA set in the future, or a UNOVA set in the past, or a UNOVA that's just different from what we know. Kind of imagine Pokemon Legends Arceus, right? Which was set in the past, sort of. Imagine instead a game set in the future, where everything is a bit different as well. So that's kind of what I'm trying to say here. It's like whatever this game is, it's going to be one of these 4 most most likely. And the fact that he tweeted this, keep in mind, he's a legitimate leaker. He doesn't put the stuff out unless he has a reason to put it out. And he did specifically put this out there, which is very, very, very strange. So I thought I would mention that really quick because he is a legitimate source. So he is the one thing I would bring up as being a big reason as to why this might happen. The next thing, though, is that he also said original soup, original taste. Now, what does he mean by that? Well, basically, original soup, original taste was a tweet which was supposed to be kind of a joke to joke about specifically what the Chinese were referring to Pokemon Diamond and Pearl remakes. So BDSP were basically called original soup, original taste, which is supposed to be sort of an idiom, sort of a way of like saying that like, oh, like almost like in a jokey way, supposed to be saying like, oh, this is supposed to be a original like game, like, you know, it's original taste, the same way you remember it, but people might not like that, right? It was supposed to be a joke, I think, either in the Chinese community or the Japanese community, that people were like, yeah, Diamond and Pearl remakes were ass because they made them too faithful almost, right? And that's kind of what the joke was here. I could be totally wrong about the way I'm putting it, but that's more or less the general gist of it. So that's kind of what we have to work with on that regard. I don't really know if there's much else to say about that in particular, but it is just worthwhile mentioning, right? I think it's worth bringing it up and just recalling to it. So just keep that in mind. And also keep in mind that things can change, right? But some of the stuff that he has been saying here, for example, is there's another post where he talks about specifically what is the paradox of black and white. And then he said the Chinese uncle leaked. And, you know, specifically it was somebody saying here, it is a game developed by Game Freak themselves. And it's not a Legend series game. It can be understood as Black and White 3, which is, again, super weird. But that came from a Chinese uncle, which I don't think has been confirmed to be real. I think that information from that Chinese uncle was the one that was fake, or if not fake, at least it wasn't like corroborated properly. But that's pretty much all I know in regards to that, though. Now I want to move on to the next topic, which is going to be all the references to UNOVA. So this is the big one, right? This is the one I think is the biggest one. So it's one thing listening to leakers, unless they provide direct proof for it, or unless there's somebody who's trusted like Riddler Coup, it's kind of hard to trust anything that's being said. However, one thing we can trust is the references to Pokemon stuff and UNOVA in the official Pokemon games. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, if you've been playing Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, if you played the Indigo Disc in particular, you may have noticed there's a lot of references to UNOVA. And when I say a lot of references, I mean so many that there are literal videos that are like 20 minutes long worth of it. I'm even going to be making a video of my own talking about the UNOVA and Johto references, which you can find in Indigo Disc and also in Kitakami, because I thought it was really cool how there's a bunch of references there to both regions, which is very, very strange. But what am I talking about? Well, basically, there are references. Certain characters, like for example, Drayton is literally related to Drayden, right? And then, of course, that's one example. You also have Lacey, who's related to another gym leader. You've got, like, basically all the characters are related to someone from UNOVA. But that's not all. There's also locations in here that are related to it. There's music. Even if you actually go into your club room and you change the decor in your room, you can literally see UNOVA decor, like a black and white decor. You can see the Pokemon Hollywood. I'm not sure if you call it like Pokemon Hollywood, but the Pokestar Studios. If you guys remember the Pokestar Studios, there's a literal reference directly to that. Like, it's not even a tongue-in-cheek kind of thing. It's like direct references. And I'm giving you just like small examples, but there's massive amounts of stuff. I mentioned earlier, if you actually play Pokemon, you know, the Indigo Disc, there's actually a location where you can find a Terra version or a Terra Haxorus, right? That's just walking around. Funny thing, that whole location, if you look at it from above on the map, looks exactly like the same location, the resort area, I think, from Pokemon Black and White, right? It looks like the resort area from there where you can find a shiny static Haxorus walking around, which is literally just a direct reference. And again, this is not all. There's references as well inside of the school. There's references again in the club room. There's references in the music. If you walk around, you can even get Route, I think 106, I'm not sure if it's 106, but Route 6 music is, for example, from like Black and White. I think that's what they said. I could be totally wrong on this, but because I don't really play with music on, unfortunately, so that's just my own fault. But nonetheless, what I'm trying to say is, there's loads of little references like this. There's loads of little things that just exist in here that are references directly to Black and White. And again, I'm giving you the surface level stuff. I'm really, really, really like not digging deep here. I'm giving you very much the top of the you know, really on the top of the top here. I'm not giving you the deepest stuff. Like for example, if we go through some of the stuff here, we also have Crispin, who's related to the 3 elemental like monkey brothers. So Chili, Ceylon, and Cress. He actually is related to them. Hassel's course, clan is related in some way to Drayton's family. You got the Galarian style throw is Leon's throwing style, so that's a reference to Galar specifically. But you, for example, have Secret Meloetta event, right? Like, okay, Meloetta is a Gen 5 Pokemon, and there's a reference to it here too, which is nuts. That's one of them. The monochrome style league room has a lot of things, like you've got the cities in the background, you know, you've got Castelia City, you've got the giant forest, you've got the Sky Arrow Bridge paintings and stuff like that, which is crazy. Like I said, Lacey's related to Clay from Driftville City's gym, and then you also have like the Cleavor on top of the mountain in the canyon biome with the black augurite looking rocks all around it, which could also be a reference to the fact that Lacey and of course Clay, maybe they saved that one, like, because or rather their ancestor who is related to them saved it, and then they took care of it here. So that's a possibility. There's another one that's for Johto specifically, which is a sports ball, which is specifically for the Johto bug catch contest that you are given by Perrin in this game, or by the item printer in the league room, which is pretty nuts. And yeah, there's just a lot of stuff like that. There's just a lot of things like that. There's a lot of items as well you can get your hands on, which are related to certain places. But I think that the most references are to Unova here. It's specifically in the Indigo Disc, it's a lot of Unova relationships, which makes sense because the actual location of the school is specifically located in Unova. Like, the actual school is in Unova, just off the coast of it somewhere, which we don't know exactly, which makes me wonder, is it possible that we might even not get a Unova game, but rather this was supposed to be a little Unova taste that all we're going to get, which I don't think is the reason, but again, who knows. For the most part, though, there are a lot of references in the games, and you might be wondering, okay, first of all, what do the games have to do with anything? What do the games have to do with what's going to come next? Like, that's just what's in one game. That shouldn't be related to what's coming next. Except you'd be wrong. Pokemon loves to leave hints. They love to leave little hints for what's to come next, right? For example, Scarlet and Violet were already hinted in Sword and Shield, where in one specific room, there are oranges and grapes on the walls, which is super small, super insignificant. You would never think about it, but that's not at all. There is a bunch of small stuff that's all over the place. Like the souvenir back in Black and White was a hint towards things to come later down the line. Again, there's a lot of references. There's even a Dynamax, I think, poster in Sword and, in Sun and Moon. There's a Dynamax poster that hinted at Dynamaxing or Gigantamaxing even in Pokemon, Sword and Shield. So again, my point is, there's a lot of references. There is no way to avoid the fact that there are a lot of references, a lot of them, in these games that hint towards what's to come next. And Unova is just plastered all over the place. But I will say, Johto does get a lot of attention as well. There's a lot of Johto references. They're a bit smaller, but there's loads of them all over the place. And more of them in Kitakami than there are here. And there's also even like Unova references back in Kitakami too. But in the Indigo Disc, it is chock full of Unova relations and Unova related things, which is pretty nuts. And also another thing you got to think, you got to keep in mind is that, the most logical thing to come next would also be Johto and Unova. One of those two would make the most sense in terms of remakes. And also, gotta remember, we have to talk about what else is supposed to happen here. Like, what is the actual time frame we're working with? So let's actually go into that right now. What is the time frame we're working with here? So keep in mind, now when we're talking about this stuff, when we're talking about Pokemon releases and stuff, you gotta remember that Pokemon games have been releasing every single year now for the last, I don't even know, since basically Sun and Moon came out. So what would that be, like 2016? So, because if you go back in time, 2015 was the only year that we didn't get a release within the 2010s, right? Because like before that, I think we had a release every single year. So 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, up until like 2015, I think that's when we finally had a break year. But since then, 2016, Sun and Moon, 2017, Ultra Sun and Moon, 2018 was Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, 2019 was Sword and Shield, 2020 was specifically the Sword and Shield DLC, so Crown Tundra and Isle of Armor, 2021 was Scarlet and Violet, 2022 was Scarlet and Violet, 2021 actually was BDSP, BDSP, and then 2022 was Scarlet and Violet, and also Pokemon Legends Arceus. Keep in mind, Pokemon Legends Arceus, or Arceus, whatever way you want to put it, actually came out the same year, right? They both came out in the same time. So you can't be saying, it's not possible for us to get two games at the same time. And this is where I want to talk about this, right? Because I think that we're not going to get Unova next year. We're going to get it at the start of 2025. I think we're going to get announced in 2024. Same way we got Legends announced, but I don't think it's going to release next year. I think it's going to release very, very early in 2025. Now, why do I say this? Because they've done it before, okay? They've literally done it before, and they've been proven to do it before, and it's very possible they can do it again. So what am I talking about? Well, let's talk about what are the possible things here. Well, first of all, why would I think it might release in 2025? Well, there's one big reason. the 15-year anniversary since Black and White. Now, why do I say this? Well, because Black and White, they released in 2010 in Japan, and by that day, by the 25th, it's going to be, by 2025, it's going to be the 15-year anniversary. Now, you might think, why would they wait to release it then? Well, because they've done similar stuff before, and what I mean by that is they've released specifically remakes and stuff on like special anniversaries. But why do I think that? Well, it's because I think Johto makes more sense to release next year. Now, why do I mean that? Well, basically because Johto is celebrating its 25-year anniversary in the next year, right? In 2024, Johto is celebrating its 25-year anniversary. But meanwhile, Pokemon Black and White are celebrating their 15-year anniversary in 2025, right? So it makes a bit more sense, at least to me, that that would come out at that time frame instead. And again, well, let's just break this down from the beginning, right? So if we go into the next year, into 2024, and they announce, let's say, 1 or 2 games, if they just announce UNOVA, I still don't think it's going to come out in the end of the year, because I still think it makes more sense to fit with the anniversary. Now, personally, I think they're going to announce 2 games. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, why would they announce 2 games? That's ridiculous. That's insane. They're never going to do that. Well, they already did that, okay? Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, as well as Pokemon Legends Arceus. Both those 2 games, both of them were announced and came out within a very short amount of time. They both were announced on Pokemon Day in 2021, if I remember correctly. Yes, 2021, they were both announced. Okay, so in 2021, they announced on Pokemon Day in February the 27th, they announced, hey, you're going to be getting Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl and Pokemon Legends Arceus. So that is 2 games, right? Because BDSP, that's just a single game technically. But yes, so BDSP and Legends Arceus are 2 separate games, 2 separate adventures. One is an open world set game for the first time ever, a Legends type game, never seen before, totally new. That was one. And the other one was a remake of Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, a regular, more simple, more basic remake of Pokemon, right? A very basic standard remake. And I think we're going to have the same thing this time. I think next year they're going to announce the same thing. I think we're going to get an announcement first for a Johto game, right? We're going to get a Johto game, something similar to BDSP, something more simple. Gold and Silver are celebrating their 25th year of, since they were created. It's the anniversary. It's the big year. It's the big celebration. So it makes total sense because it's been a long time since we've traveled to Johto. Like Johto, I think, is the only region now that has not been, besides, I guess, Johto and Unova are both the only regions that haven't been represented in 3D in any way or shape or form, right? Because we've gotten, we've gotten Kanto in 3D. That's with, Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. We've gotten Hoenn with Oras. We've gotten Sinnoh with both Legends and also BDSP. And we haven't gotten Gen 5, but then Gen 6 already is in 3D. So yeah, but basically it's like the only one that hasn't been represented in any way. So it hasn't been ported in any sort of way to 3D, right? It's the only game that's missing in that regard. So what I'm trying to say is this. I think they're going to announce Johto, a basic Johto remake. I say Let's Go remake, but when I say Let's Go, I'm not actually talking about a legitimate Let's Go game. But when I say Let's Go, I mean like a more simple game, like a more like a beginner-friendly game, right? A very basic, simple, standard, very easy to understand game is what I'm saying when I say that. So a kind of Let's Go Johto type game, a simple remake. And then the big game for, that's supposed to come out would be almost like a Legends Unova game. Now, when I say Legends, I don't really think it's even going to be a Legends game. I think it's going to be a Paradox game. I think it's going to be a paradoxical game, a game that is a bit weird. It's going to be a game that isn't really a remake of Unova, but rather a game that is some sort of, kind of future set game and stuff like that. And as for when they both release, I think it's going to work like this. And this is my exact prediction. I think they're going to announce both of them on February the 27th for Pokemon Day. They announce both games, and then they tell us, okay, one of these games is slated for a 2024 release, and the other game is for 2025. And then they're going to, let us know. Johto this year, so 2024. And then they're going to say Unova for 2025. Now, people might be thinking that, when will the Unova game come out? If it does get announced, right? If both get announced. Well, most likely very early into the next year. The reason I say this is because in 2025, I think we're going to have the same situation that we have when Scarlet and Violet came out. Because people seem to forget this, and it really bothers me, and it really annoys me that people don't realize this. But Scarlet and Violet came out in the same year as Legends Arceus. I think people just don't think about that much. They just forget it because time's been going so fast lately. But Legends Arceus came out at the beginning, right? Like in January of 2022. And Scarlet and Violet were announced like not even a month later in February. Like, right, they were barely a month and a half later, they announced that we're going to be getting Scarlet and Violet in the same year. And people were like, no, like, I remember when they were about to announce it, most of us thought it's not going to happen. Most people thought it was going to be a Legends Arceus DLC year, like we might get a Legends Arceus DLC. But no, we got a whole new generation, which made sense because they were sticking to their schedule. What I mean by schedule is Pokemon games follow a specific strict schedule. They actually go in a certain pattern, right? What I mean by this is that when Pokemon games are being released, they basically go in an order of like, every like 3 years, there's got to be a new generation. So it works like as follows. And let's use an example of specifically, let's use Generation 7. So Generation 7 is the Sun and Moon year. That generation followed the 3-year pattern, right? The game releases in 2016. That's the first year. 2017 is the second year. That's when Ultra Sun and Moon came out. So that's usually the follow-up game. And the follow-up game is usually like a third version. But nowadays, they don't do third versions. Now they actually do the DLC instead. So instead of that, you know, they just go that way. And then following that, they do some sort of remake game or some sort of game that just isn't normal, a little bit different. In this case, for Generation 7, the actual final game for Gen 7 was Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. That was the final game for that generation. And then you moved on to the next thing. So in case of this, let's use Sword and Shield, right? Sword and Shield is a good example you can use for actually a bit of a weird one as well, because you do have Legends, but nonetheless, here's the way you would put it. So Sword and Shield was the first games. They started the whole thing, right? They were the first games that came out. They were Gen 8 games, right? Then after them, you had the second year, so they came out in 2019. Then 2020 was the year, so that's the second year. That's when the DLC came out, so that's year 2. And then year 3 is when BDSP came out. And I guess if you want to count Legends Arceus, it does bleed into 2020, you know, the next year after that, which was 2022. It does bleed into that, but nonetheless, the usual cycle is 3 years, right? That's the usual cycle they run on. It's usually 3 years. So if we look at Scarlet and Violet right now, what are we working with? Well, exactly the same thing. We had Scarlet and Violet in 2022, right? In 2023, we had the DLC, right? So we had the DLC just now, Indigo Disc and, you know, the Teal Mask. Those were the ones for the second year. And next year is the last year. So in 2024, we have the last year of Scarlet and Violet and this generation. Like, this gen is over after next year. It's done. And we're going to move into the next generation. So I think next year makes most sense to do a final game to finish things off. Johto and, I guess, Unova. But Unova might release the same way Legends did, which is early bleeding into the next year. And the reason they probably do this is to make sure that everything fits in, and so that they can keep people excited and people buying and spending money and all that kind of stuff. Because I don't know how Legends was, if it was rushed or not. It was a bit of a weird game where it was placed. And I think that might end up happening again. We might get another weird placement, like very early into 2025. We might get the last game. And usually it's supposed to only be like 3 games per generation. But now, because of the whole Legends thing that happened, it kind of messed things up and made things a little bit different. But for the most part, the schedule should still stay the same. It shouldn't really change, and it probably won't change because it has stayed the same. It's a 3-year cycle, and then there's a new generation. So in 2025, most likely we might get at the start of the year the actual Unova game, and then the rest of the year we have to just play that game until they release and they announce in 2025 the actual next generation, which is going to be Generation 10, right? So that's the way I pretty much view this. I think that the way this is going to go in terms of what's going to happen is Johto next year, and then early 2025 we might get Unova game, or I could be wrong, and it actually might end up just being only a Unova game or only a Johto game next year, and that's it. And then in 2025, they announce the next generation. Because I'm telling you, 2025 has to be next gen, because it's going to be 3 years since Scarlet and Violet have, you know, been finished. Like, it's going to be the end of those games. It's going to be the end of their era. Their generation is over. They need to move on to the next thing. And I think the way I've actually explained it might be the best way they can go about it. Now, again, I could be wrong, but that's the way I view it. So I want to know your guys' thoughts and opinions. But now let's talk about what kind of game will this Unova game actually be? Like, what sort of game are we looking at here? Well, let's talk about that. So let's talk now about what sort of game are we going to expect here. Well, I think this is pretty straightforward, but I think it's between 3 sort of games that we can get here. Either a remake, a remaster of sorts, or a Paradox game. Now, when I say Paradox, I'm talking something similar to Pokemon Legends Arceus, right? So a Legends game, I guess, is the best way to put it. But basically, the way that things have been hinted by all the leakers and stuff makes it very confusing as to what it's going to be. Some people are saying, oh, it's going to be just a simple remake. Some people are saying it's going to be a Paradox of Black and White, right? It's going to be something different. It's going to be a game that is developed by Game Freak, but a game that's going to have a bit of a different look to it. And then there's those who are saying it might be just a Let's Go Unova game. It's between these 4 options. Is it a Let's Go Unova? Is it a Pokemon Legends Kyurem? Is it a Black and White 3? Or is it a Paradox Unova? Now, if it's a Black and White 3 in particular, what does that even mean? What does it being a Black and White 3 game mean? Is it just a sequel to Black and White 2? Does it continue it? Will the graphics look the same? No, probably not. The graphics will be 3D. But just exactly what is this game? Is it supposed to be a continuation? Is it supposed to be a remake? Is it supposed to be a faithful remake? Is it supposed to be something else? Again, it's not very clear what this game is supposed to be, at least based on like the rumors and stuff. It's not being very, very clear on what we're supposed to get here. Now, I'm going to put it like this. I think it's a Paradox game. Now, what do I mean by this? I think it's a game that is set in Unova. But again, not the Unova we remember. Kind of think about what Legends Arceus is. Legends Arceus is basically Sinnoh, but not, because it's called Hisui. It's set in the past. So I think what we might get is a Unova that isn't Unova, but it's set in the future. A game that's set further in the future, like something like that. That's what I think we might be getting. Now, I could be totally wrong, but I want to hear what you guys think about this. Like, this is the one topic which is really hard to talk about because everybody and their mother has a different opinion on what this game could be. Some people think it's going to be just simple Black and White remakes. Some people might think it's just going to be something else. Like, again, it's very hard to pinpoint this because everybody has a different thinking way of this. Everybody thinks of it in a different way. Everybody thinks about it in a different sense. I would love to know you guys' thoughts and opinions on this one because I personally think it's going to be a Paradox Unova game. I don't think it's going to be a basic remake. I don't think it's going to be a basic remaster. I think it's going to be some sort of paradoxical game. A game that's set in Unova, but not really. Similar to Hisui, because if you think about it, Hisui wasn't really, Sinnoh, but it was Sinnoh at the same time. Like, it was Sinnoh of the past, but wasn't even called Sinnoh at the time. It was called Hisui. It had different Pokemon in it, different people there. You know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, it is the same thing, but it also isn't at the same time, which is basically what a paradox is, right? Both is and isn't at the same time. So, again, I'm not going to go too deep on that because that might make all of our brains explode. But what I will say is this. I think whatever game we get next year, if it is a Unova game, I don't think it's going to be just a standard remake. I don't think you should expect to get a standard remake, and I think the most logical thing, and I don't think calling it Black and White 3 would make the most sense. I could be totally wrong, and I could be totally here, like, get my ass busted by, Game Freak, and you guys might be like, hey, you were wrong, it was called Black and White 3. I just don't expect that to be the case, and the reason I don't think it's going to be called that is because Black and White on its own doesn't carry a lot of weight. And I know you guys might be like, oh, I'm going to kill this guy for saying that, but you got to understand me, okay? Black and White are genuinely the worst selling Pokemon games of all time, okay? And when I say worst selling, I mean worst selling generational games. If you look at every other generation game that came out, like that started a new generation, Black and White are the worst ones, okay? They did awful in sales. They were the worst selling Pokemon games of all time. The worst sales, least amount of money made, everything. Okay? It's the worst performing Pokemon generation. I think that it would be very stupid, okay, very dumb from a business perspective to sell these games named Black and White 3. Why do I say this? Because if you were a person who didn't play Black and White 2, which there are a lot of people, okay, I've noticed it in the community lately, there's a lot of new people, there's a lot of younger people that are playing Pokemon and not just us old heads, okay? There's a lot of younger, new generation people that are playing that have no idea about Black and White, that don't know anything about it, they haven't played Black and White, they've only played like maybe X and Y, or not even that, maybe they've only played Sword and Shield, or they started in Scarlet and Violet. My point is, there's a lot of Pokemon that only know the Switch generation of Pokemon games, right? Like the Gen 8 and Gen 9, like Sword and Shield, BDSP, Legends, Scarlet and Violet, Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Like, there's people that only know those games. And if you're going to try to sell this game to them, it's the stupidest decision in the world to call the game Black and White 3. Because they need to play Black and White 1 and 2 first before they can even consider playing a game called Black and White 3. Now, of course, they could, That's not like an impossibility. They could, but it also would be very much like, it would just be stupid to not just give it a brand new name that you can sell to everyone. Because then if you just call it Black and White, and you give an extra naming to it, like think about Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl. It's not called Pokemon Diamond 2 and Pearl 2. It's called Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl for a reason. It's a new name. It's still a remake, but it gives it a new name, a new coat of paint, so that even people that don't know anything about Pokemon Diamond and Pearl from before will have a reason to want to go out and buy it, because they won't feel like they're out of the loop. You know what I mean? You want to make sure that everybody feels like they're on point with what they're buying, and not like they're out of the loop and don't know what's going on and don't feel like they fit in. You want to make sure everybody fits in and feels like they can enjoy it for what it is. And that's exactly where I'm trying to get with this. Basically, I think that Pokemon, I think that this game, it's gonna be called something like a brand new name. Like, I don't even think it's gonna have legends in its name. I don't think it's gonna have anything like that. It's gonna be its own game. Okay, it's gonna be its own game, own name, own everything. It's gonna be a very different Pokemon game. I don't expect it to be normal. I don't expect us to be able to put a label on it right now until it comes out. Because once it comes out, then we'll be able to label it. Because keep in mind, we have these labels. Let's Go game, Legends game, mainline game, remake. There's like 4 different labels you can put on Pokemon games. I guess spin-off is another one. You can label them all in a different way. Whatever this game that's being made is, I don't think we can necessarily label it just yet. I think until it gets announced and shown to us, we won't actually have any way of labeling it. We won't have any way of describing it until then. So, ladies and gentlemen, that pretty much should summarize that. I don't really know if there's much else to talk about in this topic. Like I said, though, I will have a video. So if you've been watching this, don't worry. If you continue watching right now when I make this video combined with the other one, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about Johto next, right? I'm going to be making a whole separate video for Johto. But if you're watching this video right now when it's been posted as a combined one, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this UNOVA video, I'm going to take the Johto video, I'm going to combine them together into one big video that's going to be posted a few days after these two are posted. And the reason I'm doing that is so that people can get a kind of a nice combined image of these two, where I've talked about both combined. And also at the end of that video, there will be extra bonus stuff I'm going to talk about, where I will go a bit more in depth, and I'll also have a podcast out talking about more of these things. But that pretty much just summarizes what my thoughts are on this right now. Like, right as of right now, I think UNOVA is a highly possible game based on all the little hints in the games, based on the stuff from the leakers, and based on the other stuff information we have received. So just worthwhile to mention, there is a lot of stuff like that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. We're going to be talking about Johto next. I'll see you for the Johto one. How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? My name is RuffledRowlit, and today I want to talk about why the new Pokemon game in 2024 might likely be Johto, or a remake of Johto, just a game based on Johto. In this video, I'm going through multiple different sections as to why it might be it. I already did a video on UNOVA, and if you're watching the compilation of all these, then you probably already saw me talk about this earlier in this video. But basically, what are we talking about? Well, a new Pokemon 2024 game being based on Johto, and there's loads of stuff. We're going to talk about different hints from leakers. We're going to talk about references to Johto. We're going to talk about why it might release and when it might release, and what kind of game is it going to be. Is it going to be a remake, remaster, what kind of game? So if you guys are ready, let's get started right off the bat with, of course, the leakers. Now, in terms of leaks about a Johto game, there hasn't really been a lot. Like, when you look up stuff from, like, Riddler Koo, for example, who's a legitimate leaker, like, he hasn't really said much about Johto. Like, there hasn't really been a lot of things mentioned about Johto in general. Like, I haven't really seen a lot of Johto-related things at all. The only thing that might be related to it is a tweet that he made called Original Soup, Original Taste, which is a reference specifically to the releases of BDSP. Now, what do I talk about this? Well, basically, it is I think, Japanese or Chinese. I could be wrong. Again, don't quote me on this, but it is basically an idiom or a joke name they have for BDSP because of how bad they thought BDSP was. Because, yes, BDSP was a legitimately, actually original, remake. It was a proper remake, but it also then had the exact same taste, and it kind of like didn't really taste that good for most people because people didn't really enjoy BDSP that much. So it's a bit of a joke, and the fact that he tweeted that could be implying that if we're getting a Johto game, that it might be a similar situation. He even posted a tweet called 2024 Predictions, and in that image, he posted something very interesting. He posted an image of, I could be wrong here, he posted an image of Johto, Kanto, Paldea, and UNOVA, which is very, very strange. The fact that he included all of those, right, all 4 of those, is very odd. Now, why would he include Paldea in there? And I actually have a prediction. I'm going to break this down exactly right now. I think what he means by this tweet is as follows, and I'm going to put this on screen here, and I'm actually going to maybe even do a little bit of Photoshop work to explain it. I think that if we go in order of what these are, because he said 2024, which is very strange, I think this is what he's talking about. Because in the bottom right, we have Paldea. What do we mean by Paldea? I think that's a reference to the Indigo Disc's final epilogue, or the final epilogue for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, which is called the like the Mochi story, right? The epilogue Mochi story. This one has already been announced. It's officially been announced to be releasing in when? 2024, on 11th of January next year. So he says 2024 prediction. Well, it's all of these. Even Scarlet and Violet's getting a new thing next year, which is that final epilogue. So that is what he means there. Then what does he mean by the Unova one? Well, that is going to be, in my prediction, like I already made a video about Unova and my predictions for Unova. I think that's going to be specifically the Paradox game. I think that's what he's referring to right there. It's like the Paradox game. That's all that that is referencing. That's at least what my thought process is on that. That's the new Unova game, which is going to be happening. But then you might be wondering, why is Kanto and Johto there? Well, it's because for those of you who haven't played any Johto games before, if you haven't played Pokemon, Gold, Silver, Crystal, or Heart Gold, Soul Silver, if you have played them, you already know. But if you haven't played them, you should know that the game features both. Gold, Silver, Crystal has both Johto and Kanto in it, which would be perfect for a single game, right? It's like what we've already had before. Gold, Silver, Crystal had both Kanto and Johto, right? Or Johto and Kanto, depending on what way you want to put it. But Johto was first, and then Kanto was the second region you could do in the same game. Guess what? Heart Gold, Soul Silver, which were remakes, also had Kanto and Johto both in it. So if they're remaking the Johto region, it's only to be expected that Kanto will get a remake as well. So I think this image right here is exactly what we mean, like basically proves, I think this image proves that we're going to be getting all of these are going to be happening next year in 2024, which kind of puts some of my speculation about when the Unova game might be releasing, might put that one a little bit in jeopardy, but I still think that this is making the most sense to me. Like, I think this makes total sense that we're going to get a game that is Kanto Johto, right? Because that's what always the Johto remake, like that's what Johto always is about. If you have a Johto game, you almost have to have Kanto with it because they did it once and now they have to do it forever because they already did it for Gold, Silver, Crystal, Heart Gold, Soul Silver. It's 5 games that featured both Johto plus the Kanto region extra with it, right? So I think that's what this image is telling us. I'm pretty sure, I am 100% certain that's what this image is supposed to say. So at least from leakers, that's pretty much all information we really have. I don't think there's really been much else mentioned from leakers in regards to this exact subject. I haven't really seen much else being mentioned from this subject, but I think that's pretty much where I think that ends. I don't really know if there's much else that's been mentioned. Like I said, there are a few things maybe that have been brought up, but for the most part, I think that pretty much is the only big one that we have. I don't really think there is much else that we can mention about this, but I still think it's good to know. I still think this is like definitely enough of a big hint. This is definitely enough of a big reference that I think it is relevant. It's going to be relevant down the line. But that's not all though. Let's actually talk about some of the actual Johto references that we have seen in the actual current games of Scarlet and Violet. Well, there have been loads of references to Johto and Unova, right? Now, if you've been playing Indigo Disc, you've probably seen a shit ton, okay? So many references to Unova. They've been everywhere, but that's not all. There are also references to Johto. For example, if you talk to Perrin, she will give you a sports ball. Now, the sports ball is something we have not seen since, I think, Heart Gold and Soul Silver, because the sports ball is a specific Pokeball that's used in the bug catching contest back in Heart Gold, Soul Silver, which is pretty crazy. And also, Perrin herself could be a reference to the photographer in Heart Gold, Soul Silver. If you guys ever played Heart Gold, Soul Silver, there's a photographer that goes around taking pictures, and, well, she herself, Perrin, could be a reference to that. Speaking of which, Perrin in herself is already related to, like, Adaman from Legends Arceus, but that's besides the point. What I want to say is that she's already there referencing a bunch of Johto stuff, but if you actually play Pokemon, Scarlet and Violet, play the Indigo Disc, the sports ball is one of the Johto references, but there's also Johto music, like old school gold silver music from Johto that can play in Kitakami. Like if you actually walk around Kitakami, you will find places where if you use your actual camera to take photos, they will actually play Johto music, which is crazy. But again, that's not all. There's even more. For example, the exclusive Pokemon for Kitakami, the exclusive Pokemon between the two games, were both Johto Pokemon. I think it was Apom and Gligar. I think those were the two Pokemon, which are both Gen 2 Pokemon. So again, a lot of references, a lot of hints, okay? So many small hints that it's supposed to be like based on that. If you think about it also, if you take Kitakami and you take Blueberry Academy, the two of those like places, they're both somewhat based on specific locations that are related. So Kitakami feels more traditional, set in the past, right? A game set in the literal past of Pokemon, which is just how Johto feels. Johto is a more old school region. It feels more old and it feels more like, you know, like Japanese in its design. Whereas the Indigo Disc is more modern, set in the future, more futuristic, and it's also based on more Unova, because it's literally in Unova, right? It's right next to the Unova region, or in the Unova region, and Unova is based on the United States, specifically based around New York and that part of the world, which is more futuristic, more set in the future, more, that's at least like what they design it to look like. And that also makes more sense to Unova. This is why I am always been saying, in even the previous video, what I'm saying is that I think we're going to get both next year. I think both are going to be there. But I think the actual Johto references are very noticeable. There's a bunch of more that I just don't know off the top of my head. I think one of the easiest ones is maybe the patches on your character's arms. Like if you're playing Scarlet or Violet, your actual patches for your academy will either be gold or silver, which is a obvious Johto reference. Very simple and small, and you might be thinking to yourself, no, that means nothing. But again, the small references are the ones that matter. The small stuff, the small little things are usually the things that actually have an impact and could be a hint towards what's to come next. Now, people want to discredit or go against the possibility of Johto next, but I want to talk about another thing which I think, you know, makes the most sense to me, which is because it's the anniversary, right? Next year in 2024, it is the anniversary of the original releases of Gold and Silver. It's going to be 25 years, ladies and gentlemen, 25 years. It's time to celebrate, okay? It's time to celebrate. It's time for everybody to get happy and excited because, yeah, we're celebrating the, you know, anniversary of the second generation of Pokemon. So what would make the most sense to do for that, you know, period of time? Well, the most logical thing to me, at least, is release a remake of that generation. It just makes total sense to me. Again, the little hints in the games and just the stuff that's being talked about, it all perfectly points towards that direction. At least it does to me. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe I'm overthinking this. Maybe I'm overdoing it. Maybe my brain is just a little bit too nuts about the stuff. Maybe I think about the stuff way too much. But I do think it makes the most amount of sense, at least in my opinion. At least the way it's pointing right now, it seems like the most logical thing, at least to me. But again, there's enough hints, there's enough stuff that's pointing in this direction. Let's talk now about what is the actual release schedule for this. Where will this fit in with all the other releases? Because we already talked about a little bit about this, but let's talk about it further. So, I think this game would release next year. I think a Johto remake or a Johto game could release next year. Again, I already mentioned it, but it is the 25-year anniversary. Now, Pokemon does tend to do big stuff when there is anniversaries, and when I say big anniversaries, I mean when it's the 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, 10-year, 15-year, whenever it's like every 5 years or so, when there is a big anniversary to be had, they will make a big deal out of it, or they will release something big to coincide with it. But that's not all. If you think about it, Johto is the only generation that has not been remade in 3D yet besides, I guess, Gen 5. Because everything else has already had its remake, right? We've already had Gen 1 remakes in 3D with Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. We've had Gen 3 remakes with Oras. We've had Gen 4 remakes with BDSP. And we've had, Gen 5 most likely will be coming afterwards and next. But that's the only other one that hasn't gotten any love. So the only two generations that don't exist in 3D yet are Johto and Unova. Both two regions that are being referenced the most right now. The most right now in this specific set of games. So yes, they're being referenced in this DLC more than anything else, like those two specifically, and more so Unova, because I think the Unova game is going to be bigger, and I think whatever game we're going to get, it's going to release next year. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the actual schedules here and how this is going to work, at least in my opinion, because the game we're going to get, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later as well, which is it going to be a remake, a remaster, a Paradox game, a Legends game? I'm going to already say now, I think it's a remake, just a basic remake, but what does that mean for its release time? Well, if we look at how BDSP released, right, like let's actually talk about how did BDSP work and how did Legends Arceus work, because BDSP was a very basic remake, and it came out in November of 2021, if I'm not mistaken, right? It came out in 2021 of November. It was part of Generation 8, right? When it came out, only a few months later, so November, you're halfway through November, you do about 1 of December, so that's a month and a half, and then so basically 2 months later, in the beginning of 2022, we got Pokemon Legends Arceus. Now, both of these two games were announced at the same exact day back in 2021 during Pokemon Day. Specifically announced on Pokemon Day, both of them announced the exact same time, okay? Both were announced the same time, same moment, same everything, okay? It is crazy, but they were both announced around the same time, which also means something very important, that it's a possibility that if we do get Johto announced, that it will be the first game to come out if they announce a Johto and Unova game, because it's highly possible that that could happen. They could announce them both on Pokemon Day in just about like 2 months now, guys. Like, it's not long to go now. We're at the end of December now, and guess what? They could announce it, on Pokemon Day, both these games, because we don't have a long time to left now to actually wait. But when they do announce it, we will get ourselves a interesting result to look at. So that's just something to talk about. But here's the thing. I think the release date makes the most sense to be in 2024 for a Johto remake. It's just because it lines up perfectly to be with the 25-year anniversary, and it also lines up perfectly to be with, how BDSP came out, right? Because that's the same thing. And also, Pokemon games, they tend to release in November. Like, November is the usual release date, minus Legends Arceus, which was that's the only game that released, outside of the regular release schedule. Like, it is really just a little bit different. Okay, I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but it is a little bit of a different one. It works a little bit differently in terms of how things work with it. So just keep that in mind. It is a bit of a different game, but as for this game though, I do think it's going to make the most amount of sense for it to release in that time frame. Now again, I could be wrong. I could be mistaken. I want to know your guys' thoughts and opinions on it, but that's pretty much where I put my money at. I think that the most logical place is November 2024, next year, 25th anniversary. Perfect. There's not really much else I could say in regards to that. I think that perfectly summarizes it, but I think it pretty much gets that across. So now let's talk about what kind of game is this going to be. It's going to be a remake, a remaster, a Paradox game, and we're going to again talk a little bit about how does this work with the Unova games, how does this work with everything else. But let's first talk about what kind of game is this going to be. So, I don't think that whatever game we get next is going to be a Legends game. I don't think whatever Johto game we get is going to be a Legends game of any sorts, or a game set in the past or anything like that. I think it's just going to be a basic remake, because that's the only generation so far that's kind of missing a basic remake, right? Not counting, I guess, X and Y and Unova, because those are the only other two that you can really think of. But if you think about the other ones, they haven't had a basic 3D remake, specifically a game made in 3D. Yet, right? They just haven't had that yet. And it's been a long time, okay? You gotta understand. It's been longer since we saw Johto in a Pokemon game than since we saw Black and White. So it only makes sense that to celebrate the actual, beginning of the end of this generation, and also to celebrate the 25th anniversary, would be to cap off the year of 2024, right? By giving us a Johto game and then starting off 2025, because keep in mind, this is very important, because none of this works without both of these games coming out at the same time, because I think they're gonna give us a Unova and Johto game. I'm pretty certain of it. I am 99% sure it's gonna be the two of them and not just one. I don't think it's gonna be just a single one. And another thing I want to actually bring up is a specific reference, and I want to specifically take this exact moment here and bring this up. But if you guys played the new Detective Pikachu game, there is actually a really cool reference to both Pokemon, Gold and Silver. There's basically two paintings, one painting of Ho-Oh and one painting of Lugia. And I already covered this a little bit, but the name of the painting on one side for Ho-Oh is called Golden Sunrise, right? And meanwhile, the other painting with Lugia is called the painting's called Silver Waves, okay? Pokemon Golden Sunrise and Pokemon Silver Waves are perfect names for Pokemon games, especially remakes, okay? Pokemon Golden Sunrise and Silver Waves. What the hell, man? Those would be perfect names, okay? Literally the perfect names to use for this. I'm not even kidding. I don't know what else would work as well as this. This is just literally perfect naming scheme for this. I literally can't think of anything else that would work as good as that. So why am I bringing this up? Because that's just another reference, and I forgot to mention that in the reference section, but I think it's another big reference as to why these games make sense. Why would they be mentioning Golden Sunrise and Silver Waves? Why would they mention that? Why would that even be mentioned in Detective Pikachu, right? This is a game that came out this year. This new Detective Pikachu game came out this year. Detective Pikachu Returns, right? If you haven't played it, I played it. Not the most fun game. It's actually a pretty bad game, but it did come out this year. And the fact that it has a bunch of hints towards Johto makes total sense. Plus, those two names are the perfect names for basic remakes, right? It's the perfect names for it. It's the perfect naming scheme, perfect way to call them. There's no other way to put it. Those are just the perfect ways to do them. And like I said, if you think about like all the stuff that needs to come out, right? We already had BDSP. That was a basic remake. And I think we're going to get a similar thing with Johto, and it's going to do the same formula, right? Okay, 2024. They announced it on February 27th. They announced, hey, you're going to get Golden Sunrise and Silver Waves, as well as Paradox Unova, right? They're going to announce that. Boom. Awesome. Then they're not going to tell us the release dates for a while. They might just tell us which year they're releasing. They might just say, hey, 2024, you're going to get Golden Sunrise and Silver Waves, right? That's what you're going to get in that year. Awesome, great, cool. Thank you, Nintendo, Game Freak, and Pokemon Company. And then they might tell us, and Unova is going to come out in 2025. Why are they doing this? Well, to celebrate the 25-year anniversary of Gold and Silver, we're releasing Golden Sunrise and Silver Waves to celebrate the release of these games. Awesome. And then to celebrate the 15-year anniversary next year, they're releasing Unova, because remember, Black and White are celebrating their 15-year anniversary in 2025, right? Keep that in mind. They're celebrating their anniversary in 2025, but Gold and Silver are celebrating their anniversary in 2024. So if they do the exact same release schedule, the exact same one, the identical one, they are perfectly set up and perfectly poised to make the perfect, again, I really mean the perfect release schedule that looks just like the release schedule of BDSP and Legends Arceus. At least that's where I ended, and that's where I think it. Now, what's the game going to be? Remake, remaster, Paradox, Legends. Which one of those? Remake, because it hasn't had a regular remake. We haven't seen a regular remake of Johto in a long time. We haven't seen Johto in its regular form in a long time, and it just makes total sense. Now you might be thinking, well, if it's a remake, what kind of remake will it be? Will it be a Let's Go style remake in 3D, or will people be angry if it looks like BDSP, right? Like Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, like if it looks like that, will people hate it? Well, this is where I think the biggest issue about a Johto remake lays, right? Is it going to be a Let's Go style game? Is it going to be an ORAS, like Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire style game, or is it going to be a BDSP style game? I think out of those three options, an Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire style game would make the most sense, right? It's the one that like would probably make the most sense, look the best, and probably would work the best if they made it like that. And that's, of course, if Game Freak was to make it. There is a chance that this game could be made by Ilka again, right? Ilka is the company that made Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. A set of games that are so hated and people are so angry about those games that I would doubt that Game Freak would want to let them do another game given how people responded. Now, I don't have the biggest gripes with it. I don't think BDSP is the best set of games, but I also don't think they're the worst set of Pokemon games ever created. They have their issues. The fact that we're made in Unity made them very easy to like hack and change stuff in. They also had a lot of, let's just put it like this, a lot of bugs, okay? The games are prop full, chock full, smack full of bugs and issues, which are undeniable. You can't avoid them. Literally, they're so on the nose, it's crazy. That's one thing you have to keep in mind as well. So there's a lot of stuff like that you have to keep in mind, right? There's a lot of things like that you have to just remember are an issue to begin with. So, yeah. If they do make games and if it's Ilka making them again, then I think a lot of people will be angry. And I don't think it's going to be the best set of remakes. I think the best case scenario here is a Let's Go styled game. Now, Let's Go were not good games. Let's just put it like that. Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, they were fine, but they were not very good games. They were very empty. If you finish the story, you're done with the game. There's really nothing to do. There is some multiplayer gameplay you could do in the game, but I swear it's just empty, okay? The game is just empty on content. There's nothing to do. And if they're going to be remaking these, let's be honest, they're not going to be remaking Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, but Heart Gold, Soul Silver, it makes the most sense, I want Heart Gold, Soul Silver. Let's be real. They're not going to remake Heart Gold, Soul Silver. They're going to be remaking Gold and Silver. And Gold and Silver, if we're going to be real, didn't have as many features as Pokemon Heart Gold, Soul Silver. Because Heart Gold, Soul Silver had like what? A Battle Frontier. You had Kanto had multiple things. You had a bunch of event Pokemon, right? You could even like get you could even get Hoenn Pokemon in Heart Gold, Soul Silver. You can get, Gen 4 Pokemon. Like, you get Pokemon all the way up to Generation 4 in Heart Gold, Soul Silver. But if they want to make a basic little remake they can quickly sell, that doesn't take too much effort, they can easily get out and release in this time frame, then that game is Gold and Silver remakes. Not Heart Gold, Soul Silver, but but gold and silver, which means only Pokemon up to Gen 2. So you would only have Johto Pokemon and Kanto Pokemon. That's the only thing. Only have those. No Gen 3, no Gen 4, none of those. Maybe the occasional one just for references, but that's what I think. And I would honestly be very disappointed if they did that. I think Heart Gold, Soul Silver are the best Pokemon remakes. And I think if you want to make the best Pokemon remake, I think you need to make it a Heart Gold, Soul Silver remake. Like a remake of a remake, right? If you're going to recreate Heart Gold, Soul Silver, I think will be the best choice. Now, of course, they're not going to do that. They're going to be recreating Gold and Silver, which means less features, less Pokemon, less fun, okay? Less things to do, less stuff to explore. One of the best things about Heart Gold, Soul Silver, you can catch a bunch of old legendaries. I think getting your hands on like Rayquaza, Kyogre, and Groudon is so much fun because you need to like complete your game, do a bunch of stuff in the Kanto region, and then you can talk, I think, to Professor Oak and stuff, and they'll give you these special orbs, right? Like the red orb, the blue orb, etc. The Jade orb is, for example, for Rayquaza, and you got to go to a specific location, a hidden location, to get your hands on, Groudon or Kyogre, depending on if you're playing Heart Gold or Soul Silver. And then if you have both of those Pokemon in your party, and you go and show it to Professor Oak, I think, or Mr. Pokemon, I don't know which one of them, they'll give you a special final Jade, which is like the one for Rayquaza, and then you can go and capture Rayquaza too. I think small stuff like that is really awesome, and I'm gonna be real with you, they've been doing a lot of stuff like that in the new DLC, the Indigo Disc. There's been a lot of small things and events like that I think are awesome, and I think that's a good indication, and hopefully they remember that and they keep those things going into Gold and Silver remakes, because I'm gonna be real with you, I'm very scared. Johto is my favorite generation. Heart Gold, Soul Silver are my favorite Pokemon games. I love them to death. I think they're the best Pokemon games ever created in terms of just like sheer amount of content you can do and stuff you can do and just exploration and things. And the fact that they are Gen 4 games essentially is a bit of a weird one, but it does make the games like just perfect in my opinion. I think they are just an amazing set of games. But here's the problem. They will never be remaking Heart Gold, Soul Silver. They're always going to be going and remaking the original versions of them, which is going to be Gold and Silver. And Gold and Silver have their issues. Gold and Silver don't feature Pokemon up to Gen 4. Gold and Silver are not as good, okay? They're not as good as Heart Gold and Soul Silver. They're lesser. The same way that, in my opinion, Diamond and Pearl are worse versions of Platinum, right? I think Platinum is the superior Gen 4 game. It's the better one. And I think we have the same issue here. We're going to get a lackluster-esque version of the two. But that pretty much summarizes it. So let's kind of summarize up everything we talked about. Let's summarize everything we've just mentioned right now. Okay, so first things first. There are multiple hints by the leakers. That image I talked about, that whole image is honestly enough proof for me. Like that image proves to me that it's going to be Johto and Unova next year. Like that one image, that one post he made is enough proof for me. Like that proves it to me. But that's not all. We also have a lot of references to the game in Pokemon Indigo Disc, Kitakami, and Scarlet and Violet. Okay, there's a lot of references. You see Johto being referenced here and there. There are Pokemon that are being special exclusives that are references. There are music from, Johto that seems to be referencing. And this is just a bunch of small stuff that references Johto. Like, there's a bunch of little things that reference Johto. But again, that's not all. We also have the 25-year anniversaries. The big thing, right? So the 25-year anniversary is the big one that's happening next year. And it makes total sense to be giving us a new Pokemon Johto game to, celebrate that anniversary, to kind of celebrate and get excited and give people a reason to be excited. That makes total sense. But then, of course, what game is it going to be? Well, the most logical thing to be is a remake, a basic remake, because I don't think a Legends game is going to happen. That's too big of an adventure, too big of a thing for them to do, and it doesn't feel like it fits as well. A remaster makes no sense either. I think it's just going to be a proper remake, just like we've had them in the past, just like we've had with BDSP, ORAS, Heart Gold, Soul Silver back in the day. Just a standard, or even Fire Red, Leaf Green if you want to put it like that, or even Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Just, a standard remake. That's the way I view it. It's going to be a remake of sorts. How it's going to look and feel, I'm a little bit torn on that, but that's pretty much where I would put it right now. So, ladies and gentlemen, that pretty much summarizes my things on that. Again, like I said, you might be thinking, oh, this is not going to happen. I don't know, Johto's not going to happen. But seriously, it's in the pudding. The leaker has hinted it. The games are hinting it. The 25-year anniversary is hinting it. And just the logic, just do some thinking. It makes sense, okay? I am on the Johto train, choo choo choo, all the way to the bank, okay? Because I am certain it's going to happen. But that doesn't mean that I don't think Unova's going to happen. I am certain we're going to get both of these. I think we're going to get both of them I just think so. There's no way I can view this in any other way. I think we're going to get both. I think both will happen. We're going to see how that turns out, but I think both of them will be happening. Now, as I mentioned in my previous UNOVA video, as I mentioned in the UNOVA section, is that I think that there is a logic to how they do these things. There's a logic, right? Every generation has to go in a certain way. And how they did it with Legends and BDSP kind of gives you already a prediction for how they're going to do this as well. It kind of already gives you a bit of an idea of what they might do, where they might go with it, how they might approach it. All of that is already being hinted to us in one shape or form already, right? It's already being hinted to us one shape or form already through stuff in these games, through hints in the games and stuff like that. And of course, we can't forget the literal leaker included a picture of Kanto and Johto, UNOVA, and Paldea for 2024. All four of those make sense. But like I said, that's pretty much the end for the Johto section here. This is the end of the Johto video. Now, I'll be making a video where I do a combination of this video and the UNOVA video and some extra thoughts at the end after making both of these with some of like, my extra thoughts about what I think about these things. So stay tuned for that video. It's going to be like way longer. It's going to be a compilation of this one and the last one. And I'm going to give you some extra thoughts and opinions of mine as to what I think. So thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one. All right, everybody, so here we are right now. You probably watched through this video. You've seen me talk about the UNOVA. You've seen me talk about the Johto. Now it's time to talk about everything. I want to talk about everything combined into one. And this is where we're going to start, right? Both UNOVA and Johto are games that make sense to do next, right? Now, you might, again, think to yourself, it's too much, right? Because there's a lot of people have different opinions, right? Either people will be thinking, it's too much to do all of these, okay? Like, they're not going to do it because there's too much stuff, man. There's too many things. It's too much. But they already did that, okay? BDSP and Legends Arceus, in my opinion, are a perfect example that they have done that before. It's not impossible. It is very much doable. And again, both games releasing, next or being announced next, again, makes a lot of sense. The leakers, right? Again, Riddler Coup, #1 leaker, I would say, the person who's been giving us the most amount of legit info. Again, you can discredit him on some stuff, but for the most part, I would say 99% of the time, he's been accurate and correct. Especially about the new game releases. Like, I think he never gets the new game releases wrong. Maybe some sort of features and stuff, but never in actual new game releases or even new Pokemon that are going to be showing up. He never gets those things wrong. He's always pretty much correct about those things. So what I think is this, right? I think based on the two things he's posted, the fact that he posted a poll, right? A whole poll where he talks about, hey, is it going to be, hey guys, is it going to be like, let's go UNOVA? Is it going to be Paradox UNOVA? Is it going to be Legends Kyurem? Or is it going to be Black and White 3? I think that's the hint towards a UNOVA game. But then you might be wondering, okay, but where's Johto? How does Johto fit in? Well, he posted another thing, which I already talked about in the Johto section. He had a tweet where he posted a picture of Kanto, UNOVA, Johto, and Paldea. Now, I said already in the Johto video that I think the fact that he references Paldea in there is very strange, right? Why would he talk about Paldea next year? And some people might freak out and be like, oh, we're going to get a third DLC. We're going to get a third DLC. We're going to Kalos. Ooh. No, because the final thing that we're going to get for Paldea is next year. We already know what it is. It's the epilogue. It's like the kind of mini third DLC thingy that you get to do if you finish Kitakami and you finish the Blueberry Academy. If you finish the story in those two DLCs, then on the 11th of January, okay? On the 11th of January, by the time you're watching this video, it might already be out. But by the 11th of January, they're going to be releasing a special event, right? They're going to be releasing a special event where you're going to be able to go and do an epilogue and catch a special mythical Pokemon. Now, it's a bit of a spoiler maybe, but then again, most of you probably don't care. So you're going to be able to go to a special event, and that's next year. That's in 2024. That's what covers the Paldean part there. But what covers the other ones? Well, UNOVA, that's the Paradox UNOVA game. What about Kanto and Johto? That's two separate regions. Yeah, but what does every Johto game that's ever been made feature? Kanto. Pokemon Gold, you have Johto and Kanto. Pokemon Silver, Johto, Kanto. Pokemon Crystal, Johto, Kanto. Pokemon Heart Gold, Johto, Kanto. Pokemon Soul Silver, Johto and Kanto. The 5 games from Johto that exist always feature Kanto. You cannot have a Pokemon Johto game without Kanto in it. So when he posted those 4 pictures, he's not talking about 4 separate games. He's talking about Paldea having specifically one thing, which is, in my humble opinion, Paldea is supposed to have the, whatchamacallit, I'm totally lost here on words. Paldea is supposed to have the new epilogue, right? The special epilogue. UNOVA is the Paradox UNOVA game that's going to get announced next year. Johto and Kanto are a single thing. Those two are a single game, not two separate things, not virtual console. Because some people are like, oh, we're going to get red and blue and green, re-released, and we're going to get gold, silver, crystal released on the Pokemon on the Nintendo Switch Online. No, it's just a Johto remake. That's all it is. I don't think it's much more than that. I don't think there's anything else to say about it. And again, both these two make sense. I don't think, though, that the UNOVA game will actually release. I think it will be announced next year, and we'll know about it next year in 2024. But I don't think it will release next year. And this maybe goes a bit against his post, but I think his post is more about what will you actually get to know next year, right? Rather than what will exactly release next year. But it also could be released. Could it be that they released a Johto game early in 2024 and then the UNOVA game in November? Like, they've done this before as well. They've actually done this in the past. They already did this kind of with Legends Arceus and Scarlet Violet. Legends Arceus came out in January, and then Scarlet Violet came out in November. They could do the same thing. They released a UNOVA game in like summer, and then they released the released the Johto game in summer, the remake, and then the UNOVA game in like later down the line in November. It's highly possible as well. Again, any of these two combinations might work, but again, it is the 25th anniversary of Johto, and it's the 15th anniversary of UNOVA, Black and White specifically, in 2025. So I think late November, early January 2025. That's the way I view it. That's the way I put it. And that's pretty much where I conclude this. Again, there are enough hints in the games. There are enough hints from leakers. There are enough hints from every corner. If you don't think either of those two are going to happen next year, you are crazy. I'm sorry. But one of those two, I personally think both. I think both are happening, but I think at least one of those is going to happen next year. But I think both are happening. Personally, in my heart, I think both are happening. So that's my thoughts and my opinions, and that pretty much summarizes this video. That summarizes this series of videos that I've been working on. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.